Hello? Is this thing on? Am I live? I guess I can check. Yeah, okay. Hey Tim, how's it going? As always, probably going to give it a couple more minutes, see if anyone else joins, wants to hang out. I don't think the stream is going to be super long today. I only got five photos submitted. So we'll probably work on those and might work on an image of mine or two. I'm not sure. We'll have to wait and see. How's everyone doing on this? Well, it's a pretty overcast, foggy, pretty overcast day here in Florida, but you have the flu. That sucks. Although I guess sitting inside watching YouTube is not a bad thing to do when you're sick. It's not COVID, right? Oh, maybe I'm not supposed to say that. I'll get demonetized. That used to be a thing, weirdly enough. If you talked about COVID or said it in like your titles and stuff. Might be too intense. We'll have to wait and see. Hey Zach, how's it going? Hey Tia, did you see I replied on Discord? Why is the chat not working? Maybe when I switch it to this screen it'll be fine? I surely hope so. Okay, I'm going to switch to this screen and maybe it'll work. No. Okay, nothing is loading. What is happening? None of my stuff is loading in this. Huh. Oh, now it loaded. But everything is going very slow. I'm... Very strange. Worked totally fine a bit ago. I'm very confused as to why the widgets aren't working. Hold on, let's try this. Okay, well, here's hoping it continues to work. Anyways, I responded to your message on Discord about having different colors based off what you're looking at. So between you and your husband's computer, it's very likely that the monitors are different. That's normal. But if you have a MacBook and an iPhone, the colors should look very similar. And that's usually where I would check. I would love to turn it off and back on again, but I can't really do that while it's live. So here we are. I mean, I can do that, but then it breaks the thing, and then I have to I don't know. I don't want to do that yet. It seems to be working now, so let's just cross our fingers and hope that it continues to work. Yeah. I don't know if you just heard me. Maybe you're literally responding on Discord now, but your MacBook monitor should be pretty accurate, at least in my experience. It's entirely possible that maybe it's set to the wrong color gamut on the monitor, but I'm not entirely sure. All right. We are going to start. So there's about 15, 16 of you guys here. I think I'm one of them, so probably 15. We're going to be editing some viewer submission photos, and I think I said it correctly, but down in the description, there's instructions on how to submit your own photos if you would like to. I only have about 5 photos to edit, so if you submit them within the next, while I'm on the stream, maybe we can edit some more. But for now, we're going to do these 5 and then see where it goes. Okay. So 2 of these images were sent in by Zach. 2 of these images were sent in by JB. And 1 of these images was sent in by Tim. And I'll try to point out who is who as we go through them. These 2 wave images were sent in by Zach. And I'll be honest, I haven't really looked at these images yet. I have no idea what we're going to do with them. But it's kind of the fun is to see images and then figure out what to do. So, where to start? I think we're going to start with this image, which I feel like I've seen before. Zach, is this the one that got stolen on that website that you had to send a takedown notice for? Am I remembering correctly? Okay. My photographic memory coming in handy. All right. Oh, there's a bird up there. Where to start? Okay. Before I start moving sliders around, personally, I think the thing to... Oh, didn't mean to bump my mic. I think the thing to figure out is what are we trying to show in this image? Okay, first of all, I do need to check something. How much color is in this? That's definitely not correct. Like, what kind of colors are in this? Okay, so we have some turquoise colors, but I don't really know if they're relevant. Okay, back to reset. I mean, this definitely feels like a texture and an image that is more about the reflections and the textures and the lighting here in the wave, right? The reason I'm thinking about this is trying to ask myself questions like, is color important? I think the answer is no. Does that necessarily mean we're going to do black and white? Also, no, because little touches of color can be nice. But I'm not totally worried about color, and I'm more worried about textures, shadows, contrast, and things like that. So, with that in mind, I think the best place to start is to think about editing in a way that accentuates those textures and colors, not colors. My mind is, we're warming up here. We just turned the car on. The brain is just getting going. Maybe by the end of this, I'll make sense. So with that in mind, I don't want to switch it to black and white yet, but that might be something we try. I think right now I'm thinking of going for like a really high contrast look. My concern is that as I brighten the image up, the whites are going to get blown out. So I actually think something I want to try is I'm really noticing these like little white streaks right here, right through the image where these little wave things are coming up. And I really like that. And I think that's something that I might want to really play into with our high contrast image. So first, let's get a white balance that looks correct. I actually think the default of how the image was taken is probably pretty close. But I also don't mind a slightly cooler image as well. I think we're going to leave it as default, and then we can change that a little bit later. I actually think there's a part of me that really wants to take this into Photoshop and do some very light luminosity masking with these little streaks of white here. So I think that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to brighten up this image. We're going to end up doing this like a manual luminosity masking way, but only with one exposure. So if you're new to the stream, this is probably something you've never seen me do. But if you're a returning viewer, this is something that I do often. And the reason that I do this is that a lot of the times when we luminosity mask, people are taking multiple exposures that they took on their camera, and they're blending those together with luminosity masks in Photoshop. However, there are times that I want to do the exact same thing, but with only one exposure. And the reason I do it this way is so that you learn how to do it with multiple exposures or one exposure, and you apply the same concepts no matter what. Now, what I'm about to do, you can do a completely different way. I could just take this image into Photoshop and then mask in with a brighter curves adjustment and then mask out darker spots and only use that one exposure. But for learning's sake, I like learning something once and then just applying it to different variations of that thing, and it's also easier to follow along. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to make a bright exposure. I'm going to increase this by 1 stop, and then I'm actually going to bring up the whites to add some natural contrast into it. And I really like the way this is looking. And the next thing I'm going to do, because I'm going to be blending images together, is I'm going to bring down the... oh, wait, hold on. ISO 400. Okay, so actually, we'll do this edit. I'm going to bring the sharpening down, bring the details up, but I'm noticing like a little bit of noise here, so maybe we'll take this into denoise and run them both through. Let's see what happens when I adjust. Yeah, sure, we'll add those in. Why not? 51.2. That's quite the lens. I don't think there's many more adjustments I want to do on this. So I think we're just going to leave it at this. We're going to come down to turn this into denoise, which one thing I love about the denoise in Lightroom is that it'll just apply the exact same settings that I have on the image once I run it through denoise. We're going to hit enhance, and then we're going to create a virtual copy of this image. That's the darker exposure. And we're going to build off of that. And again, you can do this a different way in Photoshop. You can use just the one exposure, but I like creating multiple exposures and then blending them together that way so that you can apply that knowledge no matter what type of image you're doing. You can follow those same workflows, even though it's redundant to do kind of what I'm doing. So now that I have my denoised image, we are going to create a virtual copy. Now that we have our second copy, I'm going to come up here and remove that extra exposure that I did here, like that. And then I'm going to take both of those into Photoshop. Hope that makes sense. Obviously, feel free to ask questions in the chat, interact. No, you're good. I think what I said here was probably more insightful than what I said on Discord anyways, so. Oh, cool. This is already set to the right size. Okay, so we are going to take our dark exposure, and because I kind of want to leave the sky a little bit dark, we're going to work through this. We're going to create a mask, come up here, and we're going to build a bit where those bright spots are. So we're going to have to use this luminosity mask here. Now that we have our selection, we're going to come in here. And then I kind of want to get really specific on this. So let me see what this is looking like. Not 100. We're going to come in here and change our opacity to about probably 10. Let me see how much that's affecting. Yeah, and then we're going to want to paint in. This is where having a tablet, like a drawing pad, would be very, very beneficial. Mostly because pen strokes, or me trying to follow this line right here, would be much easier with a pen. But I'm going to try to wing it with a mouse. And we're just going to kind of paint in. I think I want this to be bigger. And I need to make sure that it's 0% hardness. Nope, that's too big. Also, I'm still painting in too much, so let's go really small. Again, I really think a drawing tablet would do wonders here, and I have mine here somewhere. But I'm not sure if I have it set up correctly right now, so we're just going to have to do our best with just using a mouse. And I'm really just painting along these white parts that are already there, and I'll show you before and after. I'm probably doing a pretty butcher of a job here, but oh my god, see, brain is still working. I would like everyone to look down here. I would like everyone to look down here and see what I have selected. If you ever use Photoshop, you know the amount of times that I've accidentally drawn into the actual image rather than my adjustment layer is too damn high. I also don't even think this is selected correctly. So let's go back to layer order and we're going to start over. Because I don't think any of that worked correctly. Lights mask. What does that mean? Okay. We're just going to start completely over. I guess it's one of those days. Edit. Open as layers in Photoshop. Move this down. Create a mask. Do this. Is it because of... What the hell is this? What is going on? Why isn't this working? Let's hit X. Let's start over. Aha. Maybe that's why. Select. Aha. Okay. Woo. All right. We did it. We made it. We did it. All right. Now we can actually do this correctly. Let's go back to 10 as our opacity. This will probably really help my selection here. Okay, we can go to 20. That's why it was so bright. That makes sense. I don't even think I had anything selected, which is... I should have noticed, but... Okay, cool. This is where I want it to be. Now I'm going to come in and do exactly what we were doing before. Painting in these little lines. And something to note is that if I'm not using a drawing tablet, everything is additive. So, not that you can see, but when I paint from down here up, every time I paint in, it's adding more and more to whatever I'm painting on top. So for example, if I wanted the areas that's next to these little dark spots to be brighter than the spots that are up here, which would naturally happen if I was using a pen, I would be pushing down a little bit harder near the brighter spots and letting go as I got up. The way you can kind of do that with a mouse is paint over this section a bunch, but then don't go as high up. And then it'll just gradually increase it more and more. That's probably a bit too much. So that's basically what we're going to do. And the reason we're manually doing this is because if I were to come in and just add some contrast into the image, I want these to be further separated. So I want the dark parts to be further from the white parts, but not adjusting the contrast of the whole image because we already have some really dark spots in the image. So by painting in this, which we've already done just a little bit, we're brightening those spots we want to brighten manually, and it just gives us a little bit more control into the artistic vision that we had when I brought the image in. And it'll all make sense in a little bit. Again, I will remind you that I think this particular image would suit really well to a pen and drawing tablet or using my iPad or something like that. But I did not come prepared on the stream to use that right now. So I'm just using a mouse, and I think the point will still stand. of how this is going to look. I think this is a good start. And then we're going to get a little bit closer, and we're going to kind of hopefully draw in some little accent points here, even though there's not any naturally in the image, to kind of bring it together once it reaches this area down here. We've done a little bit. That's not too bad. Okay. So this is what we've done. I'm turning it off and on, and you can tell the difference is minimal, but definitely there. And I think that's going to look really nice once we apply some major edits to the image. So other things I want to look at are other spots that I want to accentuate while we're still in Photoshop. I think this little line would be nice to accentuate. So we're going to do that. I'm going to create 15%. So I just type 15 in while my brush was selected. I'm going to do my best job at just highlighting over this. And I kind of want to highlight this spot a little bit more than the rest because this is already pretty bright. So I'm just going to make sure I paint over that multiple times. I'm going to come through and do a little bit more sweeping motions here. Yeah, that's looking nice. I'm also going to do it on this one a little bit. And again, this image is about textures and contrast. It's not about necessarily about the subject or something like that. We're almost going to end up making this look, in my eyes, the idea that I have is to almost make you question what it is, to where you can figure it out once you keep looking at it. But at first, you don't know what it is. So that is kind of the idea here. I'm going to paint it a little bit more white. So hopefully my selection right now is only selecting these white parts. And I'm going to create some more contrast between these dark parts and the white parts right here, just ever so slightly. And we're kind of experimenting as we're going here. That sometimes is the fun of photography editing, is that I don't necessarily know what's going to work and what isn't. And sometimes it's a little bit of trial and error. The question is, do I want to accentuate some of these little spots? And I think I do. So we're going to go to 20% on our opacity, come down here and paint in some more of these lines here. And thankfully my mask is doing a lot of heavy lifting here where I can kind of be dirty with my selections just because it's only selecting the whiter parts of the image rather than these darker parts. And it's kind of helping me with that selection. I think that's looking pretty good. Okay. I'm looking along different edges here. Okay, so something I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of that mask. We're actually going to create a curves adjustment to darken a little bit of the image. I'm going to invert that mask by hitting Command I. So now it's not doing anything. I'm going to come up here and select a darks mask. Let's go a little bit darker than that. I really want the separation to show. So anything in black, I won't be selecting. Anything in white, it will select. And I really want a lot of separation between where we painted in that white part and where the dark part is. I think something like this should work, maybe between 2 and 4. And all I'm going to do is paint in some big brush strokes here. Got to paint in white, so I'm going to hit X. It's going to swap my colors here. And I'm going to paint in, turn that layer on and off. So I actually have shortcuts that turn the visibility of a layer on and off for this case, but I also have shortcuts that turn it on and off a mask. And those two shortcuts are right next to each other. I highly recommend them for photo work because a lot of the times I'm trying to check what I'm actually doing to the image. And I like being able to do that as I go through and edit the image. So we're going to keep painting some larger brush strokes here. And I'm really just trying to basically get the darker parts of the image that are next to those whiter parts more accentuated. So I'm going to turn this on and off, and you're going to see that it's just ever so slightly darker, but it's not affecting the white parts of the image that we just painted in. And I think that's looking pretty good. So now what I want to do is I kind of feel a little bit lost in the image in terms of what else I want to do with it in Photoshop. Maybe these little spots need to be brighter, but maybe they're kind of where we want them to be. So what I'm going to do is I tend to not do a bunch of global edits in Photoshop. I really only do brushwork, luminosity masks, and stuff like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit save. We're going to save it, and we're going to go back into Lightroom, and then we're going to try to play around with the edit and see where we're at in terms of contrast, color, if we want to switch it to black and white, that kind of thing. So now our image is saved. First thing I'm going to do is crop it down. Oh, not like that. Well, let's just hit reset. Because I don't necessarily know how much sky I want in it or how much of this I'm going to want in it. Because again, this is all about the textures and tones. So maybe something along these lines is really where I want to be working. But maybe not. Let's leave it this way. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is we're going to come in here and do a, sky selection mask where we're going to end up inverting it. Because I really want to bring up the whites of the image, but I don't want to affect the sky. I'm noticing it's hitting this spot too, and I don't necessarily want to affect that too much. That's okay. Let's do that. Let's come in here to strong contrast because, again, that is what we're trying to do. And we're going to notice that the image is a little bit too dark in the center. But we're going to fix that by creating a giant radial filter here, kind of in the center of the image. But what we're going to do is we're going to rotate it about right here. We're going to bring up the exposure just a little bit. And then I want to bring up those shadows, even though we've added contrast in, but we've made those a little too black. And then what I think I want to try is I actually just want to bring the whites up of the whole image. We're actually just going to crush the whites. Let's not do it this way. Let's bring up some of the whites in the middle first. And then let's bring up the whites of the whole image. Yeah. Now our big decision here is, do we want more clarity to obviously bring out a lot of that separation in what we painted in? And honestly, this is looking like it might be a little too strong, but we can manage that in a little bit. I actually think we want to bring down the clarity of the whole image to kind of mix in with how the movement in the water is, but we're going to bring up the clarity in this mask to counteract a little bit of that and add some of it back to the image. Something like that. And I think that's looking okay. I really need to figure out what we want to do for the sky here. You know, again, if we're going an abstract route, no, I don't like that. I really think you have to decide where the wave cuts itself off. The problem is when I cut the wave off up here in the corner, it works nice for having this diagonal, but then we have so much of the image taken up by the sky. I really think that's going to have to be a decision for later. The reason I'm thinking about it right now is kind of thinking about the edit in general. So I think this is looking pretty good. I think we want to bring up the whites of not the sky, so we're going to come in here at our selection. Yeah. Maybe a little bit of the whole exposure. Yep. And then let's see what this looks like in black and white. I feel like our work here was a little bit too strong, so we're going to come back probably. Let's go back into Photoshop. Let's come here to this mask. I'm just going to take a really big mask at about, let's do about 10%. I'm going to paint in white here to kind of remove a little bit of what we painted in earlier, because it's, again, a little too strong. And the before and after of that is this. I think that's pretty good. We're going to hit save and see what it looks like. That was a weird sound, sorry. All right. Cool. That looks a little bit better. Again, I don't want to overdo it to make it look like that's not naturally there. I would definitely have to massage that back and forth a little bit, for sure. And then I'm going to just desaturate the image. I don't think the colors are doing too much for the image, but I don't necessarily know if I want to go black and white. I think this is looking pretty close. Maybe bring up some more of the shadows. I'm going to bring this down. I'm actually going to crush our blacks here a little bit. That's nice. Let's come in here and play with our HSL. Go to the Luminous tab. Let's just want to really blow out that sky on purpose. What colors are this? Just green? Okay. That looks pretty good. And again, this was kind of the look that I was going for, is more of a high contrast, high key image based off of what we were given. And I think this is looking pretty close to where I want it, or I would be done with it in terms of how I envisioned the image. Something else that's really interesting that I think you could do is you could quite literally come in here and crop this down really specifically to accentuate and highlight this. And I think this is actually kind of cool. I would try to get rid of the sky here, maybe by doing this, even though I like having it come back up. I like this, having this hill here. So you got to make a decision there of what you want to do. I could probably just darken that little section there like that. Obviously it's going to look terrible in the big image, but with this crop, something along these lines is kind of what I was envisioning in my head, is really focusing on this portion of the image. I don't know what I would necessarily do about this section here where the sky is. Maybe just leave it. This is definitely one of those ones that I would have to come back to. But of course, you could also just leave it cropped like this to really leave in a lot of the details of the image. But what's interesting is something that's nice to do is always zoom out of your image to get a sense of kind of where the colors are, what it looks like as a thumbnail. And I really like the way that this black part contrasts with the white part on the wave. And you have these lines here. And I think this is pretty close to what I would do. And I would obviously sharpen the image back up. Something along those lines. The reason I'm kind of waffling on about what's left of the image is kind of dependent on the crop. So for example, I don't want this white section down here. It's distracting in the image, and I have multiple options on how I would want to handle that. We could create a mask that just removes some of the highlights down there and removes some of the exposure, so it's not in your face. You're not looking at it directly. But we could also just end up cropping it out, depending on where you want to take the image. And so that's kind of why I'm not making a decision there, because I think that part of the edit... See, I really like this, actually. This looks great. This actually looks great. I want a little bit more, just a little bit more. So what I'm going to do is we're actually just going to come in here and paint in a little bit. Just get rid of this white section, hopefully, if that's what that's going to do. And that looks terrible. Right there. Come on. You could do this. Old Photoshop. You got this. I would definitely use generative fill for this, but I'm in the old version of Photoshop. You know what? Screw it. Let's just open in the correct version of Photoshop. And do it the correct way. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask. The whole point of being live is the interaction with you guys, so it actually feels like I'm not just talking to a screen. No pressure, though. All right, now we can hit edit. We're gonna hit original, edit, and then it should open in, oh shoot, I didn't close out of 2022. Did I accidentally open the wrong one? No, I didn't, okay. Edit, open in 2024, edit original. Can I make it square? All right, and see, this is, okay, cool, it loaded correctly. I have not updated my OS version. I'm planning on doing that over the little holiday break while I'm stuck at my relative's place doing nothing. And Photoshop 2024 is not technically native to this version, so it definitely has some glitches for sure. Man, that still doesn't look right. Come on, you can do better. All right, that's good enough. And while we're here, we might as well just remove some of this white spots here. Ah, I don't like the way that looks either. Okay, let's paint a little bit smaller. Just only get in this little... Cool, whatever. Doesn't have to be perfect. It's already pretty abstract anyways. That looks fine. Now we'll hit save. Is Josh Thomas Eaton. He does love his square crops. So I actually have a plan. I've been planning this for a while and I should really start doing it. I wanted to make really short videos that are like parodies of different YouTube personalities. And for Thomas Heaton's, I was just going to like... I was basically going to be like, all right, I've driven 2,600 miles. I've got my medium format film rolled up and ready to go. What are we going to photograph? We're going to photograph light poles. Just light poles. In Iceland. Because I just thought it was ironic that he drove that far and then ended up taking photos of light poles. Okay. This is almost square. Can we make it square? Can we just... Boom. It's square. Look at that. This blend doesn't look great. I don't know if you would ever know if you didn't know that I put that in, but I would definitely... Oh, yeah, that looks terrible. Well, no, it kind of matches. It doesn't look great. I would redo this. But in terms of the final image, this crop is looking pretty good. I don't think I would leave it square. I think I would want it cropped exactly where that goes to the corner. Yeah, I mean, this is close to square. But I think this is where I would... This is pretty good. This is... Yeah. So here's where we started. Right here. This is where we ended. I might play around with the colors a little bit more. Again, I might try black and white. This is definitely... Yeah, I like black and white as well. I think black and white actually might sell it. But this is definitely an image I would have to come back to. Because it's interesting. Sometimes edits like this one are so... I feel like this particular image, if I'm going in this direction, is very dependent on the edit. Right? So there are some images where you take them and you don't really change a whole lot about what you saw in the field. But this particular image was like, we made a conscious choice to focus on the more abstract elements of the image rather than like the photography as it is. Is there a reason to stick to the old Photoshop? In my particular case, yes, because basically every time they release a new version of Photoshop, for some reason, here, I'll show you. And I don't know if it'll come through on stream, because this is actually, me zooming in and out here actually looks perfectly fine on this particular version of Photoshop. But all through 2023, before they released generative fill, for some reason, scrubby zooming on the newest version never worked. It was super laggy for me, no matter what settings I changed. And so I actually ended up reverting back to 2022 because I didn't have any problems with it. So because of that, I've just kept 2022 all through the generative fill portions. and have kept it as like my main editing Photoshop unless I need generative fill, which has also been kind of buggy with my OS version. I'm two OSs behind. I need to update. But that is the reason I've kept the old version, is because I know I can rely on it. And every new version with generative fill and what they've added in has the scrubby zooming has at one point didn't work very well, and then it did work. And yeah, so I just keep the version I know that works until I start using a new version that feels like it's seamless. No, you're good. You're good, Josh. I mean, people are totally allowed to just chill in the background. I mean, you could just not even pay attention if you don't want to. I just think it's one of those things where a lot of the times in the past, people have felt like they don't want to bother me or ask too many questions or things like that. But in reality, like the whole reason I'm sitting here is for this part. Otherwise, I would just film a video and post it to the channel. So, okay, I think this image is pretty close. Zach, if you're here, would love to know your thoughts, considering this is your image. I don't have any idea. I can't remember what yours looked like. But I think the final product is less important than the concept behind the approach of the edit. Hope that makes sense. So I know you sent this one in, but I'm going to move on to someone else's photo, and then we'll possibly go back to this one. So JB sent in this photo and this photo, and I already have a good idea what I want to do for this photo. This looks like it's from Antarctica. Actually, he told me where it's from. Hold on. We have the knowledge. Where did he put this? Let's find out. He said this image was from... Okay, well, one of them is from Vegas. I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's not this one. Svalbard. This is from Svalbard. Got it. Cool. The good news is I'm not dropping any frames, so that's fun. All right, so for this particular image, that's a lot of birds. Let's see, ISO 125. Looks like there's a bit, I don't know if it's camera shake or something, but it's not perfectly sharp, but no, it's probably distance. I think we're shooting at 400 mil here, so this is already small and far away. Gotcha. Well, we at least approached it from the same way. I just kind of pushed it more, I guess, in that way. And like I said, I don't necessarily know if this is where it would finalize, but I really love, and it's something I'm looking at in the thumbnail up here. I really love the way the lines look here that we did. I really like that because now it has these lines in it here, and then also circles in it as well. And there's just a lot of nice shapes and textures in it for sure. And I think the black and white really helped bring that out as well. Okay, so for this one, I kind of want to do like a really high key image where we purposely like completely brighten the whole image to where our subject in the image sticks out a bit more. Because right now it's kind of blended in. You can't really tell it's there. And what's really interesting is if we just brighten up the whole image, it becomes immediately more apparent that it's there, in my opinion. And I think that's where we're going to take the image. So I don't necessarily think we're going to have to do any Photoshop with this. I do see a little lens thingy there, but we might even crop that part out. So we're going to do Adobe Landscape as our color profile. It's what I always do. That's definitely not where I want to take this. We definitely want this image to feel, and the reason when I'm hitting white balance and hitting auto here and it thinks that it should be warmer is because this entire image is blue because glaciers are blue. So it's just going to try to be like, hey, you need to warm this up because there's too much blue in the image. But in reality, this is probably pretty accurate. Maybe something like this is probably what it looked like in real life if I had to guess. But the cold feeling and being blue is important. So let's go over here to my editing companion, and you're going to notice that a lot of the things that go through this also match exactly what I do in my normal edits. So when I click on white balance in profile, it's automatically going to switch my profile here and automatically going to put my white balance back to auto. But we know for a fact that we just talked about that and it's not what I want to shift to. So we're going to do something like this. I don't know if I'm going to boost up the blues a little bit, but I might bring down the red hue in my calibration down here. And then I'm going to brighten up the whole image by a little bit. I'm going to brighten up the whites. And again, the whole point of what I'm trying to do here is really highlight the subject, which is this boat. Going to add some contrast in, maybe strong contrast, but then I'm going to also bring up my blacks a little bit. Maybe this is too bright. Haven't decided where I'm going next. South America still in the cards. So, driving to South America was supposed to happen this January. But that was like, oh man, that was the plan over a year ago. And maybe I should make more of a public video about it. But I don't think I'm going to do it yet. I don't know when I'm going to do it. The reality is, if I was to leave next month, which is not possible, it's not happening, I know that it would take me basically 2 to 2.5 years to finish that trip. Driving down there wouldn't take that long. But if it took me 6 months to a year to get down there, I would want to stay in South America for a year as well. And that means that I would be like almost 37 years old by the time I finished. And at the time, about a year ago when I made this decision, maybe 9 months ago, I realized that I didn't know if I could handle the isolation for that much longer. So I kind of decided against doing it now. And I've always told myself that I can still drive from Mexico down at any point in my life. It doesn't have to be right this second. So that is basically on an indefinite pause. However, I am going to Patagonia. I still have to book the trip, but I am going to Patagonia at the end of March is my current plan. How's it going, Sean? All right. I don't really think we have to do a whole lot to this image. Let's come in here and adjust our luminances in our slider here to just kind of really push. Really going to try to push this image. Is that affecting this? Yeah, cool. We'll crop out a top part of the frame. Now, this is an interesting question. Is for every bit that I leave in the bottom, I have to balance it with the top. So maybe something like this. And then I want to center the boat. I'm looking at this little dot here. And you can always, a trick is that if you want something in the center of your frame and you want to know where the dead center is, these little dots at the top and the bottom here are where the center is. But then if you need a line to go through your image to see it, you can always just press on the rotate when the rotate selection tool highlights. Like I'm literally pointing at my screen like you guys can see it. But when this little hand turns to the rotate tool and I click on it, it creates this line through the image that then shows where the center of the image is. Something along these lines, I think. Probably needs a little bit more to the left. Cool. The reason I'm cropping now is because I'm trying to think about, I want to see the image that I envision in my mind first. But sometimes you're not going to crop until the last part of the image. And that's why in my editing companion, I have a pre-crop and a post-crop because of the kind of things that change as you go through your edits sometimes. So let's, I kind of want some dreamy look. Here's something interesting. So like a lot of the times for me to decide on if I want clarity or not, I'll boost the clarity up really heavy to kind of see what it's doing in the image. And then I'll detract it a lot to see what it's doing in the image. And I kind of just vary it based off of which one do I like more. And I actually really like I really like this less clarity thing because it removes a lot of that grungy texture from the glacier there. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to remove the clarity by about 15 of the whole image. And then we're going to create a radial filter that's around the boat. We're going to invert it, and then I'm actually going to remove more clarity to the rest of the image. And again, that's going to create that hazy, atmospheric, bright white that we're going for here. Almost like a dreamscape, if you will. Like it feels like you're, I don't know, looking through, things are in the fog almost. I'm going to remove some dehaze there as well on that same exact selection. And you're noticing that we're really pushing. I mean, our histogram is all the way to the right, which is kind of what we wanted. Now, what do we want to do? I'm going to take a second to think rather than just talk my way through it. So if I were to really want to put this in my portfolio or do a print of it, I would probably go through and remove a couple distractions. So for example, these lines here, I don't necessarily know if I would paint them out, but them being on the edge of the frame is making it where that's all I can see. So a little quick thing we can do here is we can just create a little radial filter, and I'm going to intersect that mask with a luminance range, and then I'm going to select the luminance of that little thing there. And then I'm going to hit show luminance map, and we're going to try to get that looking basically where that line is. And that's pretty good. It doesn't have to be perfect. And then what I'm going to do is just bring up the shadows. Let's bring up actually the whole exposure. And it doesn't have to be very much. Then bring up the shadows. And then I'm going to zoom in to make sure it doesn't look too terrible. And I think that looks fine. But just notice that mask on and off, even though it's still there, we didn't remove it from the image. It's just slightly less distracting on the edge of the frame. And the reason that's happened is because we cropped this way. And I think if I had left it like this, I'm not as concerned about that particular element. But because we have cropped it to where it's right on the edge of the frame, I don't necessarily want that little distraction there. I'm going to bring some of the saturation down because the image looks a little bit too colored. Let's see. Oh yeah, I really like when it feels colder. So let's just make it really cold. Something we can do is test what the white balance is based off the paint on this ship. Oh, it's literally what it was as the image was taken. So yeah, cool. I like that. Yeah, Tim, you can send me another one. Feel free. And if anyone's joining in or here wants to submit an image, in the description of the video, there's the instructions on how to do so if you want to try to get one to me before the end of the stream. We're only through the second image now. I'm obviously taking my time. So feel free to send me some if you want, and let me know in the chat if you did. I think this is looking pretty nice for what we wanted to do with it. I don't necessarily know how much more I want to do to the image. I definitely think I want to remove some clarity in this foreground just a little bit more. I'm also, strangely enough, going to brighten it up a little bit because it just feels a bit too dark compared to the rest of the image. And so what's really interesting about this image is instead of brightening the center of the image, thus accentuating the boat, we have brightened the whole image, leaving the boat slightly darker, and it's kind of what's popping out in this image. And I kind of really like the way it looks. So we're still not clipping on any of our things, but if I create a virtual copy here and hit reset on that virtual copy, this is where we started. Now, we have lost some detail in this glacier here. But I really love the atmosphere. I love the way it feels rather than this like grungy, glacier-y look that I tend to get every time I take my own glacier photos. And it kind of hides all of that. Maybe it's a little bit too bright. Maybe it's just a little bit too bright. Oh. And again, this is something that when I walked away and came back to it with fresh eyes, I would be like, oh, that's too bright immediately. Or I looked at it on a different device. Now, the reason I created this other image was just for example's sake. If I came here and increased the exposure, but then just made a big radial filter here and increase the exposure in the center of the image, kind of like this, that could be a direction you take the image. But I kind of like the idea of increasing exposure in the brights of all of the image, thus making this stick out as the dark part of the image, which is what we've done. And I think this is roughly where I would at least leave the image to come back to with fresh eyes. I'm still thinking that maybe this foreground is still too dark. So maybe I would bring up the shadows in that rather than the whites. Something else you could do, another idea is if we were doing this kind of edit, you could create your own light, which is part of my editing companion here. So if I did that, it's going to create a mask up here. It's going to just create a radial filter that acts as a, a little source of light here. Probably want to remove that it added some temperature. And you could technically edit this way as well, where it's to something to these effects, where it's almost like a spotlight. And these are two completely different ideas behind the edits. And it's really up to your taste of what you want the image to look like. I really like this one though, because it, I don't know, it just gives me this dreamlike feel. Not very contrasty. I actually want to crush the blacks a little bit more. Even though I literally don't think there's anything in the image that's black, but yeah, that's nice. Okay, let's move on to JB's other photo, because I don't really know how much is here. I mean, this image almost looks like I don't even need to edit it. So I don't really know what we're going to do to this. I mean, I can already tell that if I brighten this up, that I'm going to want to crop basically here to here and leave in this lake down here and probably have something along these lines. If I were to crop this down, we're going to hit reset though. And I'm going to take a second to look at the image and think what I could possibly want to do. Let me check to see if anyone has sent any more images besides you, Tim. Cool. I'm going to download it now while I'm thinking about this image. This is the type of image that is so high contrast. And I think he said this was taken from a helicopter in Vegas. That I feel like it's pretty obvious where you would want to take the image. And for me, that is probably going to be just highlighting a little bit of this river down here, but leaving a lot of it in shadow, not really brightening the image up very much and leaving it in darkness, and just making another very, very high contrast image using it. Save. Let's see if I can just automatically import it doing this. Cool. Boom. There it is. All right, Tim, we got your other image in here. We'll get to those just a second. I don't think this image is going to take very long. How's everyone's day? Oh, cool. Please do, Sean. You're planning to, but you're having a lot. Is the stream lagging? Does the stream look okay? I've had it up over here and it looks pretty fine on my end. I have it on a second device. It looks okay. All right. Here's what we're going to do with this image. I'm going to start with our normal stuff. Landscape profile. It's probably going to make that look a little more orange. So I think we're going to cool off the image a little bit. I mean, it probably was that orange in real life, to be honest. And then we're just going to create a radial. Oh, that's not. Hello. We're going to create it. Come on. Am I hitting the wrong button? Okay, we're good. There we go. I'm going to create a big radial filter here. And we're going to use this like it is a kind of like our pseudo sun mask, but I don't necessarily know what I want it to do yet. I really just wanted to kind of touch on this light here, so that might be kind of difficult. So I'm going to hit bring up the whites. Let's actually try something I don't do very often, which is using the brush tool in Lightroom. And we're going to kind of brighten up the image a bit. Let's go with 25 flow. Let's only hit the whites, maybe the highlights, and just a touch of exposure. More whites. And let's see if we can actually affect these little spots in the river. So I'm just painting over the river right now. And because I didn't really affect anything in the shadows, I only brought the exposure up by 0.1. It's not really hitting any spots on the mountains. Let's actually just reset this and just only do whites. Highlights. It's very subtle, but it's there. Yeah, that's okay. And really all I think the image needs past a crop is just making sure we can actually see a bit of this lake. So if we bring up the shadows of the whole image, let's bring down the clarity. That's just something that I tend to do. Maybe up the, I don't actually think we want to touch the dehaze. And I don't think we want to touch the contrast because, well, we can touch the contrast if we bring up the exposure of the image a little bit. And then bring down our highlights. We're going to hit M. I'm going to make just a quick graduated filter here. I'm only going to bring down the highlights in the sky because if I bring down the highlights at all on our global, it's going to affect the stuff that we're painting in here. We don't want that. So we only want it in the sky. Something along these lines. Now let's crop the image down to where I know we're going to have it, which is somewhere right here. We have to decide where we want the little stream, river to enter in. And we're going to definitely go almost 2 by 1, maybe 2.35 by 1. It's going to be a pretty extreme crop, but I think that's kind of what the image needs. And then let's look at what black and white looks like. So something I like to do sometimes is colors will look brighter to our eyes. And, excuse me, colors tend to also, when you saturate more, tend to increase the brightness by a little bit. So something that I like to do sometimes is currently to my eyes, this little river down here is starting to look bright enough. However, if I turn on black and white, I'm noticing that there's just barely any light down here. So sometimes I will use black and white to basically check my eyes. So we're going to create another really giant radial filter here. And it's only going to do minimal work here. I'm going to bring up the whites again by quite a bit. And now we can check our black and white again. It's still a touch too dark, but that's okay. I think if we actually let's go back to our radial filter that we just made. I think if we increase the shadows a little bit, it'll help. So if we actually increase the shadows a lot, it's going to look a little bit too fuzzy, but we're actually going to increase the dehaze. Oh, that's making it way too blue. I do not like that effect. Okay, so let's bring the shadows back down. Check chat. Cool, Sean. I'll go grab it in a second. Hey, Jason, how's it going? I think this is pretty close. I don't like how blue, even though the shadows should be blue in the image. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit M again. I'm going to create a pretty large graduated filter that affects the bottom half of the image. And we're actually just going to warm it up a little bit. It's going to really bring the cohesiveness of the image together. And the reason this is happening is if I hit reset on this and I bring up the exposure, all of this shadowy area just tends to naturally look blue, especially when we start adding contrast in, we start adjusting different sliders, and it just gets bluer and bluer as you push the image a little bit more. I actually have a fix for this in my editing companion over here, which tends to remove haze, but then also warms up some of that haze in the image as well. Sometimes I'll use a color selection mask for that, and sometimes I won't. In this particular case, because the image is so separated by light sky and dark shadow that we don't really need it. Something I would like is to kind of, there's so much orange in the image, I would like to add a little bit more red to the image. So I'm going to do that by adding just a touch of tint, little red tint. But I'm going to come into the HSL for hue, and we're just going to make this a little bit, that's the wrong way. We're going to select our color here, and we're going to make this just a little bit more red. Just a little bit, not very much. You could also use the new point color for this and get some more precise selections, but we don't need to. Not for this, at least. And I think this is looking much better, or at least in terms of where we want the image to be for what our edit we had in mind. We've got this nice wide screen, almost landscape. And we have, if we do the before and after, just really, again, we didn't have to do a lot, but we've brought out a little bit of this river. And actually what I'm going to do is I kind of want to darken these mountains back down to where they're harder to see. So we're going to just come back in here and decrease the shadows. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want my viewer's eye to be able to see two things, and that's the atmosphere and the clouds, but then also those little touches of light that are on the river here. And I think that if this image was a little bit more clear, maybe I would take this into Photoshop and paint in these little spots. But instead, you actually can just, we could just create some little small radial filters here and bring up, actually, let's make them a little bit bigger. And what I can do is bring up the whites, but then also warm up those spots. And it's going to, and that's the thing that's very interesting, is if I warm up this spot, it appears brighter in the image. Now, obviously, this is too warm, but it's going to appear a little bit brighter in the image. I'm just going to do this lightly, and then I'm going to duplicate a few of these to kind of touch on spots in the image. I feel like this particular spot's already pretty bright enough. How ridiculous does it look if I just make kind of one just for the river here? And again, I would be more precise here if I took this into Photoshop. But I'm only affecting the whites there. And now you're going to notice like just little touches of that. Let's bring it down just a smidge. And now if we do our before and after, we're really just highlighting a little bit of that river down there. And I think that's looking pretty nice. I think I would bring down the saturation of the image probably by about 10, so we're not pushing it too much. And then I would come and reset my eyes. And I think this is pretty good. Here's a before. Like I said, I don't think this image needs very much. It already kind of dictates how you're going to edit it. And here's the after. Just little touches of that light that's poking into the water down there. But then also we've brought it up just enough to be able to see these layers a little bit more. And like I said, you could add some dehaze and counteract that dehaze blueness by warming up the shadows of the image. And sometimes that's something I do. But I think right now I like the way where it's at. Yeah, I think in black and white you could also. That's the thing about the edit that I did, is that we're thinking more about that contrast than we are the colors. And if I were to do black and white, I would bring up this foreground a little bit more overall, something along these lines. But that is really up to you in terms of your edit. Do you want the color, like, you know, do you want to show off the vibrancy of that sunset? Or is your image more about the layers, the mountain range? My only issue with the black and white right now and how it's edited is that so much of the weight of the image is on the left when it comes to layers. So for example, realistically, this to me appears to be a better black and white overall, just because we have more focus on the layers of the mountains, but we lose out on this little spot in the river here that we're not seeing as much. And if we turn off black and white, that little touch of color down there really helps bring that whole thing together. And I genuinely think that, you know, that is probably a challenge of this particular image, crop-wise or compositionally, is that I really wish that this river, this little bow in the river where this light is hitting, was a little bit closer to where the mountain range starts to layer. But that's something you have to work with and decide if, you know, if that's how you want your image to look or not. But if I was to go black and white, I might crop that part out. Would this be, does that say, I'm assuming you mean the point color checker, the point color thing, right, Zach? This thingy? Yeah, you could do that. I don't think it's necessary for this, because realistically, I really just wanted to adjust the hue of these colors. I don't really feel like I need to go in and select this specific thing, because this does a pretty good job at overall selecting most of it. And it was very subtle. It's not like I changed much. So if I turn this off, it's this to this. It's like very minuscule. Oh, I see the shadows. I gotcha. Yeah, you could do that. That's pretty much what my preset already does. But I have a feeling that most of these shadows are almost the same color. So, okay. So those are both JB's images. The stark contrast of complete white to complete dark is ironic. Let's move on to Tim's image. Okay, well, Tim, do you have a preference on which one you want me to edit? I feel like this one has probably less leeway than this one does. My eyes want me to edit this one first. If you want some, if you want my advice, or not advice, but what is this up here? Oh, would you look at that there? Is that a boat? Can't be a boat. Why would there be a boat up there? All right. I think I'm going to edit this one. This looks like a midday shot. And I think that this is absolutely something to convert to black and white. Don't think it is? Oh, probably referencing if it's a boat. Yeah, that's what I assumed. I assumed it was a hiking hut. If I had to guess. Is this the Dolomites? So what I'm noticing about this image, first of all, midday. So the colors are usually not going to be super great during just direct sun, haze, clouds, depending on, you know, the options you're going to, or the particular luck you have for your midday light. Switzerland. Got it. I mean, that whole range pretty much looks the same. It just depends on where you're standing in the country. It literally looks, I don't know why, but it looks like it's a car plugged into an EV outlet. Okay, back on task. So what I'm noticing about this image is the diagonals here. This white, what I am assuming is a church. And none of the colors are really that important. And you can already tell as soon as I hit black and white, what's really cool is there's kind of this like, you know, line through the image of dark and white, but we also have this white down here. So something I think that's going to be fun is I think we're going to darken this grass, and this is where the point color is going to matter, I think. So let's try this. All right, let's go do our normal quick little edit here. I don't care too much about color balance because we actually might shift that a bit depending on how we want to edit our black and white image. Let's just convert it to black and white now. And then, well, before we do that, let's leave the color there so we can actually use the color checker. This is something that's very interesting. Is if I come in here and select this, it's going to affect the sky. That makes a whole lot of sense. I must be in the shadows. That's what's very interesting about trees or shadows, is that I'm literally trying to change the luminance of the green, and it was affecting more of the sky than anything else. So we definitely want to get more precise with this. So what I'm going to do is come in here to our point color, and we're going to select this green, visualize range. And I want it to not affect the trees, but I do want it to affect the grass. And then we're going to darken it by a lot, like literally as much as we can. Bring up the range a bit. So now when I convert this to black and white, does it not color up? Oh, it doesn't carry over. Okay, we can do this a different way. All right, scratch everything I just said. Well, all of it's still irrelevant, but I'm pretty sure we can come in here with the... Is this not on the new... Now here's a question. Why haven't they moved the color range mask to point color? It's still on the old selection thing. Yeah? Huh. Maybe. Okay. Let's delete that. Let's just do a graduated, then point color select. I guess you can't use point color select when you're in black and white. Huh. What happens when I shift this back? Yeah, it just reverts. Well, that's frustrating. All right. Well, now I'm a bit lost at what I should do, because basically what I wanted to do is I wanted to convert this to black and white like this, but then I wanted to darken all this grass to be much darker. But for some reason, there is no way to use the point color selector for that color when you convert to black and white. And this little minimal editing of colors here is not enough for it to do what we wanted. I'm trying to think of roundabout ways we could do it, but I don't necessarily know if it's worth the time to dive into that. I also really think that they should change this selection mask to the new point color thing. Why is this still using the old version? Doesn't matter. Nothing I can change. I can only work with the constraints that I'm given. So I think what we're going to do is just kind of approach this edit as if that's what I'm doing, because if you can visualize that all of this grass here would be much darker, that means that this little white house here would really stick out a lot more. And I think that that would look really cool. So something we could do that at least, like, I don't know, does it a little bit, is we can come in here and decrease. Not too much. Something like this. Because we're not trying to make it look unrealistic. We just don't want it to look as dark. Like that. That looks much better. We would have far more control using the point color thing that's new in Lightroom, but we can't do it with black and white. But this is at least a good starting point. So something along those lines. And then I definitely want to bring up the dehaze in the image. And then we're going to create a radial filter around this little guy, and we're going to decrease the rest of the image like this. Something that's probably close enough. And then bring up the shadows a little bit. Let's add some contrast into the image. I think I'm going to crush my blacks. No, I don't want to crush my blacks. And now what's interesting is we can shift around our white balance to adjust how we want the light to look through the image, even though it's a black and white. So I'm noticing as we make it a little cooler that the grass gets a little bit too bright, but we make it a little warmer and the grass gets a little bit darker. But I'm also paying attention to the trees. I think something along these lines. It's kind of nice. Then we can come in here and decrease the blue luminance. Although I kind of like the top of the image just being bright like this. There's something about that that I really like. And yeah. Let's I'm gonna bring our dehaze or our clarity down a little bit. Then I'm gonna create another graduated filter here and just kind of darken up the foreground. It's gonna really make your eye look right at that house. And I think this is looking pretty dang good for the concept of taking this midday shot and making it usable. Like I said, we really wanted to highlight the lines through the image. And I kind of like this interesting balance of bright mountain, line, darkness, and then this just little touch of light in the bottom left corner. Interesting. Still never used Capture One. It's been on my to-do list forever, but I just haven't. Ooh, I'm getting that weird Fujifilm sharpening thing, I think. Oh, no, I think that may just be the rocks. Okay. Let's see. I think I've lost too much detail in the trees, so I'm going to bring up the shadows a little bit more. Yeah, I think this looks pretty good. Before, after, and I think that from where we started, this is where I would take this image. I don't know. What do you guys think? I don't know how else I would edit this image if it wasn't for the diagonals and the contrast of light mountain and light church. I feel like that's what works for me in my eyes, but maybe crop out this little tree here. Nah, I don't think it's necessary. Kind of unbalances the image a bit. I could technically crop more on the bottom, but I feel like we're already on the edge of where this can be on the frame. Okay. I'm going to move on to maybe I've got some emails. I'm going to check. Looks like I did. Let me download these really quick and ask how you guys are doing. How's everyone's day? I'm glad the chat finally started working. That was going to be a pain in my butt if it didn't. Wait, what is this folder? Oh, okay. All right, 3 people sent me images. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get to all of them. Maybe if I move my legs here. Get through these pretty quick. Come on, here we go. All right. Wait. I'm trying to figure out what you sent me, Tia. Is it this one? Okay, I guess I'll find out after I hit download. Let me go look really quick. Okay. I feel like I've already edited this image. Hey, you said you should. Oh, maybe this is it. 1 second. Just trying to get these on here. Okay, so T, if you're still here, I think you only sent me the castle image. Or at least that's the only one I have on here. Yeah. Which I think we already did an edit for, right? Yeah. Yeah, you just sent me that again. Did you want me to re-edit it? All right, I'm catching up on chat. Sorry, I was alt-tabbed getting the images ready. Yeah, I bet it looks probably decent with the darker sky. I kind of just like the contrast between the bright and light. You edit it. Oh, okay. That makes sense. Yes. Okay, well then I will edit it. I was like, I've seen this image before, and I've seen it edited. Did I edit this image? Okay, thank you for the correction. That makes a lot of sense. Cool, I'll add it in. I kept downloading it being like, I think I've already edited this. But I remember I think that we critique your edit is what we did, right? Cool. Yeah, we're working on getting them on into Lightroom really quick. I think I've added the ones in here. Synchronize. Let's see if this is everything. Ooh, this is pretty. This is from Sean. What else we got in here? This is from Tia. And this is from George. And I think all of you are here, so... Oh, I don't have my screen up. My bad, guys. There we go. These are the images. Let's start with this one. This is, this is pretty. This is from Sean. While the image is beautiful, there's definitely blur because of camera shake. Looks like you are 1/4 of a second, maybe. Try to get the water moving and at 87 mil, so that's okay. I think we can still talk about the concept of the image, and you probably already know it, but yeah, you're. I got it. We're caught up. My brain clearly not working today. Yeah. Okay, let's do this one really quick. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. I think this one's actually pretty simple. So I'm going to crop first before we start because I'm going to get rid of that little branch there and the fact that there's not a whole lot going on in that part of the frame. And then I have to decide how much of this right side that I want. The reason that's important is because this really bright part of the image looks like it's blown out. And there's enough to recover there. However, I have to decide if I'm leaving it in, this bright part of the image is going to be distracting to the viewer. The problem is if I, wrong button. If I want to crop it out, then I'm getting rid of those nice trees over there in terms of the color. So I think the best option is going to be to leave it in, crop out a bit of the sky here, and then we're just going to radial filter that bad boy down I haven't even added any other edits to the image. I already just know that I'm going to want to darken this a little bit so it's not so distracting. Boom, done. So now I'm going to start my edit how I normally would. We're going to do Adobe Landscape. We're going to hit auto, see what it thinks is correct. That's definitely not correct. But I am going to cool off the image just a little bit, and we're going to add a little bit of that back in. I'm going to come down here, increase my calibration a bit. Move my hue down to make a little bit more red because I like that in my images, especially my fall images. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to darken the whole image a bit. Like this. We're going to widen this back up. Yeah, that's nice. Actually, let's crop it down a little bit more. Something along these lines. I'm trying to decide where I want to cut off this particular, or leave this tree in. I think something like this is nice. What's nice about this is you have this diagonal here with this hill. You have this diagonal here, and everything is kind of pointing into the waterfall. You're going to notice that we are leaving a little bit on the left that maybe you're asking why. And the reason is because if you know, even though this is negative dead space, if I cropped all the way to, cropped it out, the waterfall is way unbalanced. We don't want that. So we have to leave some of that in. And so now that I've darkened my image before, we're just going to come in, create a nice big radial filter here. And we're kind of brighten the whole image back up just with a little bit more controlled light, as if the sun is helping us out here, which it already is in the image. And then we're going to bring up our whites. Actually, let's start with exposure. Yeah, that looks nice. Shadows a little bit here. And this is where I'm going to warm my image back up. A lot of what I'm doing here is already built into my pseudo sunlight mask that's in my Lightroom Editing Companion, but I'm kind of doing it the manual way so you know what I'm doing. Where is it? Color. Let's warm up that light a little bit. Let's make it a little bit more red. Going to come down here and decrease the dehaze, kind of give a nice little atmospheric look there. Zoom back into my image, get out of that mask. Add some dehaze back in. Then we're going to create another little radial filter here so we can brighten up. I'm going to do it in the size or the direction and shape of where the light should be coming from so it's not a perfect circle. I'm going to brighten up the whites there. Brighten up the exposure just a little bit. And then this little puff of light or mist here is a little too bright. So what I'm going to do to fix that is come down here and just decrease the dehaze in that spot. I'm just going to balance that out a little bit. I think that's looking pretty good. Let's bring up the shadows a bit. I don't even think we have to add contrast in the image. Let's go back to our very first mask and make this even a little bit darker. Again, I think that spot is obviously reflecting light really heavily. It's going to be hard to balance that. And I think this is looking pretty good. Let's add some contrast in actually, and then bring up our shadows just a little bit. Like I said, this image is blurry just because I think there was some camera shake. But I think overall this is probably close to how I would edit this image. Here's the start. Here's the end. Pretty good. Thanks for sending it in, Sean. Yeah, no worries. I assumed you knew. And again, my editing for it doesn't really change how I would edit it. I was just wanted to point out. I think that in the future, I would have exposed a little bit darker, like expose the whole image a little bit darker. But judging by the fact that you're at ISO 100, f22, and 1/4 of a second, it means that you probably couldn't go darker. And this was pushing it to the limits because you were maxed out on everything. Don't want a faster shutter speed because then the water's not in motion. But if you could, maybe, you know, grab one of the Maven filters in the link down below, the like button. I'm just kidding. You could darken the image a bit so that these this spot's not so blown out. Oh yeah, this image. Yeah, I feel like the sky's got to go. It's just way too distracting. But thankfully there's a lot of crop leeway here where you can leave it as much as you want. Okay, let's move on to Tia's image. So this is the image that I thought I already edited, but I think it was because I helped edit it in some way. So the first thing that I would want to do is, I think a lot of the stuff in the right-hand side, I'm already noticing is not really necessary. So probably just going to crop that out. And obviously there's this leaf thing here. So let's do that. What I really like is kind of the balance between this tree and this castle here. Man, Europe is so like, dude, I have buildings of gas stations over here. You guys get freaking castles. It's not really fair. I'm not sold on this exact crop. Maybe we want something like this, but I don't think so. I think we're going to want to crop probably where this tree is on this 2/3 line or 1/3 line, and maybe where the castle is somewhere around there as well. And we'll have to play around with that as a final thing. Something I'm noticing is I really don't like this branch here, and I would probably Photoshop out this branch and cut it off right here so that it's not in the sky here. But that's something that I would rather point out rather than doing it myself currently, just because it would take some time and I don't think we need to do it. Definitely need to warm up the image a bit. So auto's looking pretty good. What we're actually going to do is we're going to cool it back off just like we did in the last image. Come down here to calibration. We're just going to crank that up. And yeah, that's looking nice. And then we're going to bring down the exposure of the whole image, kind of recovering a little bit of the light here. But we're going to put that back in, don't worry. Yeah, that's looking nice. We're going to do the exact same thing we did last time, except this time I'm going to use my mask from my editing companion. We're going to come in here and we're going to change the light to be where the light is naturally, which is right here. Expand that a little bit, expand this a little bit. And something you're noticing is like the sky is just completely blown out in this image. So, well, no, there is nothing in the sky. I actually don't necessarily think, I think we could recover it if we wanted to, but because there's no clouds or anything in there, we're just kind of going with it. Although we're going to fix that in a little bit. I'm going to come back into the mask we were just working on, and I'm going to not have it be so warm. I'm going to reduce those by a little bit. And then I'm also going to make it where it's not so dehazed there. Yeah. Actually, we can actually do this. And then we're going to use the control setting here to help fix a bit of that on the edge of the frame. Like that. You can see what that's doing. Although I kind of like that little bright spot there. You know what? We're just going to turn that off. We're going to leave it. I kind of like it. Then we're going to go back to our image and add dehaze back in. Kind of really. Then I think I'm going to notice that I want this cropped down more. Probably cropped up more. Something like that. It's looking pretty good. Let's bring our clarity down. And you notice it's kind of crazy in high contrast scenes like this, how much a little bit of clarity shift really helps blend some of those spots together. Because if I increase the clarity, it looks a little bit nicer down here. But when I decrease the clarity, it really helps with that fall off between the edge of the trees here up here and the sky. And it's nice because it kind of creates more of a glow, which is what we're looking for. And if we wanted to, we could actually add in back some clarity into here, which we can do because I think it looks kind of nice on the castle here. So I'm just going to add like a touch, maybe 5 or 10 back in right there. 15 looks good, but let's shape it in the way that the sun is actually coming in rather than just having a big, you know, and I'm putting the center of it right there on that brightest part of the image. And it's doing a very subtle thing, but you can notice it's just adding a little bit more punch right there, which I like. Let's come back up. Let's bring up the shadows of the image a little bit. I don't want to lose too much or everything here, but I obviously want that contrast of the light coming through, so that's probably a bit too much. I think I'm going to bring up the shadows of the whole image by about 25, but then I'm also going to decrease the exposure a little bit. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. Let's bring down our highlights a little bit. And I think we're getting pretty close to done on this one. Let me back up a little bit. I think I'm going to create another big radial filter here, but all we're going to use this one for is bringing up the whites a little bit, the exposure of the image a little bit, and then we're going to decrease the exposure of the whole image. Yeah. I think something like this looks pretty good. I love the birds here too. It's just perfect timing. Perfect timing. Love it. All right. Sharpening. Hold down Alt to see my mask for the sharpen. And I think at ISO 400, there is some noise. You could run this through denoise as well. Just add a little bit of detail back in. I'm wondering how much of the bottom of the frame is actually necessary. Like, what if we just did this? I don't mind this either. I actually might prefer this. But if we do this, I need this little section to be a little bit brighter. Not by too much. Just a little bit. And again, I think I would Photoshop out this branch. We could do it the dirty way in Lightroom since it's all bright white anyways. But something along those lines. Yeah. And you might be asking, you know, why I've left in that right part, because I could technically crop it to like right here. But I like the balance of this tree a little bit more in the image, so that's kind of why. Maybe something like this would be fine. But I kind of like both trees here like this. That's up to you. Come travel around Europe. I have traveled around Europe, but it has been a while. I guess it'll be 6 years coming up since my big Europe trip that I took in 2018. Yes. How to crop this image. I think there's a lot of options. I don't necessarily know which one I like best, and I would have to... What I would do for this image, if you were trying to decide on a crop and having a very tough time, is create 3 virtual copies of the image. Crop it in a different way. So like, let's take this virtual copy and add the water back in. And then I would just walk away. And then I would come back and look at the images later and see which one is really resonating with you after you've had some fresh eyes with it. Yeah, it is weird to remove the water, but I think it kind of works. It definitely becomes a more intimate crop for sure. For every bit that I remove on the right, I have to remove some on the left, though. I do like this crop a bit as well because I can actually see the birds, which is nice. Unlike this crop, I don't see the birds as much. I mean, I still see them, so they're still there. But, yeah. I was Sean, I hope you know I kind of do that in jest of just mostly trying to be funny. Failing, but trying. Yeah. Sean, I think that type of image is totally okay to do that. I just knew that I probably wasn't using that left half of the frame anyways. But also, for me, my own particular editing, I will very, very specifically only edit things that I'm like, okay, this has potential to be worth editing in Photoshop and stuff like that. And I think, obviously, if it wasn't blurry, I would put more time into it. Maybe that's... I'm not trying to offend you, but that's just how I would be. I would not put a lot of time into editing that image because of the blur. And that's mostly just because, you know, I'm doing this all the time and I have to hold that to myself. What's interesting is I actually think that if you ran that through Topaz, that it would probably be perfectly fine to post online. I feel like I'm losing chat. Oh, okay. You yeah. Yes, you're welcome. Also, I hope you know that I was kidding. All right, let's take a look at George's image. Okay, another daytime image. We got some color in here. It's a shot on a GFX 100. How big is this image? Okay, well, I feel unqualified to edit this image. Okay, GFX 102. What would I do to this image? Well, first of all, excuse me, It's a bit blue. I wouldn't say this is a midday shot because there's a lot of shadows. I just think there's no clouds in the sky. So I think the first thing I'm going to do is probably I want to crop out the bottom half of the frame and just go to where the water is. Yep. Okay. Landscape. I wonder, it's always interesting trying different camera models, how it's going to affect color when I mess with some of this stuff. Because like, look how blue that is. That's insane. Okay. We definitely need to do that. Come in here and come to our mixer and reduce some of the blue saturation. That's the luminance. Blue saturation. Yes. Probably need to warm up the image because it definitely is too blue. I think I'm going to follow the same path I have been on a lot of these images. So honestly, this is a pretty standard, you know, no sky. The light isn't super golden. Got some fall color here. Kind of leaving the composition as this river in the bottom of the frame bends around. But the river is balancing really well with the sky. So those are kind of counteracting each other. Or balancing each other. Counteract is probably the wrong word. And we have some shadows here. I genuinely think that what I would probably do is what I've done in a lot of images. I'm going to decrease the exposure by a bit. And I'm going to add that light back in. But I'm noticing how saturated the blue is, so I need to do that again. And then I'm going to, once again, come over here and add my pseudo sunlight mask to the image. Good. I'm not dropping too many frames working with this giant file. And we're going to zoom back out. That's not the one I want. Zoom out. Oh my God. Wait a second. Is this really 12%? Holy crap. 6%. Okay. And then we're going to move our light around. And we're really just going to work on only highlighting this middle tree here. We're actually going to keep a lot of the image this dark, I think. So I'm going to bring up the exposure a bit more. Yeah. Decrease the saturation overall because I know we're going to keep adding it back in. Let's bring the shadows back up after adding that contrast in. I got to decrease the saturation again because apparently 𝐒𝐨𝐜𝐚𝐫, when you increase the calibration slider, really pushes the blues. So we got to balance that out. Now we've created some light in here, but I want to bring out a bit more light, but I only want it in the center of the frame. So we're going to do that by doing this. Maybe not the white. So let's just bring up the exposure. Yeah, I think that's looking pretty okay. And I love the way the tones are looking on the beach here with this piece of dead tree. And it's looking nice. Feeling a bit too sharp though, so we're going to remove some of that clarity. I don't think dehaze is going to do a whole lot besides add more blue to the image, so we don't really need to do that either. And just out of curiosity, what are my white values here? Yeah, see, this is good. This is using the black and white. It's really showing off the things that I want it to be the brightest parts of the image, which are where the light comes through the trees here and this tree in the middle here. Something else I'm going to do is I want to change a bit of luminance on these trees. And again, you can use the point color for this, but we're doing it the quick way. I think that looks pretty good. I think the shadows in the image overall could probably be read up a little bit more. Something along those lines. And I think the before and after, before, after, I think this is pretty good. I think this is close to where I would leave it. Again, I'd probably have to bring down the blue again, but something along these lines. I think the blue is still a bit too much. Let's bring down the saturation of the whole image. It's probably too much. Yeah, I think this is pretty close. George, if you're here, let me know. Oh my God, it's Bree Stockwell. In the flesh. Well, on the internet, but in the flesh. Yeah, thanks for submitting it, George. I don't really know if I did it justice, but I think with what we were given in terms of the contrast of the light here, pretty nice 5-minute edit in Lightroom for sure. All right. We got through the images. Sweet. I think I got to everyone, at least one image from everyone. What time is it? It's almost 5 o'clock. So, yeah, I think, I don't know what my favorite edit was. We probably spent the most time on this edit, but I also think that this is the kind of photo that needs the most if you're going in the direction that we went. Is there anything else we want to edit? Do we want to look at this? I don't necessarily know if there's much in this photo that that's really sticking out to me in terms of, actually, hold on, I have an idea. I have an idea. So my idea here is to actually crop out a lot of this. Decrease this. Increase this. Brighten up the whole image. Interestingly enough, I actually think that's kind of cool. Even though I know the image was originally taken for this to be at the center of the frame, I actually think putting it on the edge of the frame is interesting. I don't think I'm going to spend too much more time on it, but just an idea. If you're still here, Zach, I don't know how you edit this image, but I don't know. Fun. Fun. Just for fun. Yeah, I have to imagine Zach had a, what are they called? Underwater cage on it. Brie, I don't think I could do your white sand images any justice. Yeah. I think naturally it's kind of like, you know, you leave it centered like this. I mean, I think this is also cool. But I think there is some room to, I mean, you could also do it this way, right? I think centered is like the obvious choice, obviously, considering that's how you took the image like this. And I think the framing of it's really nice. But it is interesting to put it all the way over here. For the black and white specifically. Something else you could do is create like a giant radial filter and decrease the, basically increase the contrast like this as well. Yeah, aquatic water housing. Aren't those like ridiculously expensive for specific cameras? I think, Bree, I'm probably done. We hit the 2-hour mark. We actually went longer than I expected to. Mostly because we spent a decent amount of time on each image. But I'm going to check my email one more time to see if anyone sent anything else. I don't think anyone did. But I got to everyone's image, which is great. So I think that's pretty much the last edit I'm going to do. And I'll just wait around for a couple minutes. If anyone has any questions about any of the photos, any photography related stuff, you can all direct them at Bree Stockwell, who is in the chat. She will probably be able to answer them better than I can. Thanks for joining in. I think we got up to 30 viewers at some point. I think my little counter there always freezes and stops working. But yeah, I think you have to be in the water enough to justify it is the biggest thing. Oh, thanks, Josh. Glad you guys could be here. I know it's a Friday. Oh, if you're still sitting around, I probably will not stream for the next 6 weeks. I leave to go to Ottawa on the 12th, and then I'm going from Ottawa to Vegas for family stuff, and then I don't get back from Vegas until mid-January, late January, and so I won't be able to stream until then, but hopefully I'll be able to stream once I get back, because this is kind of like where I have good enough internet. It's set up, you know. Funny enough, all of the stuff that I'm streaming on right now lives in my car. Don't ask me how I was able to finagle all of that, but yeah, the whole streaming setup is portable, but I'm not taking it with me on the trip, even though I could, surprisingly. So I won't stream again for like 6 weeks. Hey, thank you, Richard. Glad you could be here. Send in an image sometime. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for hanging out. Like I said, got any questions, comments, concerns, critiques? Feel free. Feel free to chime in. I think we got some pretty nice edits today. Sometimes I feel like I spend more time thinking about the images you guys submit than I do my own images, and that I learned from myself being like, maybe I should sit around with my own photos and be like, what does this image need? And really, really think about it, because I don't feel like I do that enough. Oh, I don't gamble, Bree. I mean, I do a little bit, but not like, only if I'm with friends. Hey, thanks, George. All right, Richard, I'm going to hold you to that, but you've got plenty of time. Actually, you could send it at any time if you want. Thanks, Tim. Thanks for submitting an image. Thank you, Ken. Thanks for being here, man. Glad you guys showed up. It's always fun. I would love to do it more consistently, but, you know, road life. I'm just glad I got to it. It's been 2 years. I got 3 in the last week. Feels good. Although falling behind on editing actual videos I need to edit, but yeah. All right. I will see you guys. Yeah, I definitely do get tired of looking at my own images. A lot of the times there's so much emotion built into them too, where, you know, there's some images I have that people have been like, this is a great image. And I'm like, really? What? You know, I'll go through my catalog and show people, and that particular image will stick out to someone else. And I'm like, oh, I didn't even think to edit this image. So we all look at our own stuff very differently. And it's always interesting to hear other people's perspectives, because there's been some images. There's one image that I actually ended up putting in my gallery show here in Florida that I literally thought nothing of. I was just like, well, this is Florida related. It's kind of cool because it has an alligator in it. And here, we'll just bring it up really quick. 1 second. Let me see if I can find it. I think I still have it in here somewhere. Here we go. We found it. So I didn't really think much of this image. I think I edited this image for the video last year when I made it, but like, I really didn't think anything of it. And it happened to end up being, now granted the gallery was in Florida, but it happened to end up being like probably the most popular image of the people that were there. And it was my like, I'm going to throw this image in for funsies image. So it's strange how we all see our own work differently. And I think that's what's really, really difficult as a photographer, as an artist in general, is that I can't ever look at my work with new eyes. Like, I can't look at this or any of the images I make without all of the stuff that I know that either went into it or edited it or what I feel about it. And it's always interesting to just like, I don't know, just send in 20 or 30 images to somebody random, a friend, family member, or whatever, and be like, which of these sticks out to you? And a lot of the times their answers are going to be completely different to the ones that stick out to myself. And I think that's really interesting. That's why I think being on Discord, regardless of what Discord channel you're in, and being able to share some of your images to see what people think of them, or helping pick out different images, is so important, because a lot of the times you just can't see your images how most people would see them without all of that extra input. Yes, I've already, Sean, thank you for the recommendation. My girlfriend was like, oh, you have to have a beaver tail when you get here. And I was like, all right. Hey, thanks, Zach. Thanks for being here. And thank you for all the patrons that were in here that submitted images as well. Tim, yeah, we can look at it. I'll look at that in just a second. I don't think I'm going to edit it, but thanks for being here, Russ. Yeah, let's take a look at it, Tim. I think overall the image didn't strike me very much just because I feel like I'm having a hard time figuring out what the subject is. Mostly because the bottom half of the frame is so close to the edge that does that mean that the clouds become the subject? Is it the atmosphere? I feel like this person's also more of a distraction than a subject as well. Yeah, Bree, we need to catch up. We haven't. I know it's my fault. We missed the call last week, but I was streaming. Don't hate me. So yeah, I think the questions for this for me come to be like, what is the purpose of the image? And if it's more of a contrasty image, like we switch it to black and white, we add some contrast in, we bring up the whites, we bring down the highlights, I would be removing this person. But I don't feel like it's speaking to me in any way. And maybe that's harsh. So sorry, I'm not trying to be. I just don't feel like the image is really leading me anywhere visually. Unlike the other image you had that you sent in that we worked on, I feel like this was much stronger in terms of subject matter, being able to edit it to a point where we could actually give a story to the viewer or try to tell, have someone find something in the image that they resonate with. And what's interesting about this cloud image is it's not too dissimilar from Zach's image in terms of like, what is the subject? What are we trying to look at here? But I just think we had more room to play around with this one and actually, the clouds are the main subject. Enjoyed watching. Oh, thanks, Karen. Thanks for being here. I have another version with more beach and less clouds. Yeah. Well, if the clouds are the subject, I think that I would probably crop out almost to a square here. Is Josh still here? And I would probably play around with a bit. But for me, these clouds aren't really in. Again, this could be an in the moment thing. Actually, it could be a where you live thing. Maybe you don't see clouds like this very often. But for me, these clouds do not. They're not sticking out to me as something. As a subject matter, if you will. So that's why when I saw the image, it didn't really speak to me or really feel like I could do a whole lot with the edit because I wouldn't even necessarily know where to start. But if the clouds were what you want people to look at, then I think cropping is probably the first place to get rid of a lot of this busyness or something in the image that is mostly not helping with that. Obviously, I'm playing around with this as I'm talking to you, so this is obviously too warm, I think. But I do think this is a very specific case of you personally feel something about this image. Maybe when you took it, maybe the way the clouds looked in real life. That just isn't translating to me as a viewer. Yeah, I can see the dark versus light here, for sure. And it's interesting you say that, because if we reset this image, I don't see that in this image, right? To me, I don't see that because the contrast is lower. You took the raw that you have to edit back in, and you feel that because you were there. You knew, and I have to imagine that light versus dark feeling that happened while you were there doesn't translate into this raw image, but you knew it was happening because you were there, obviously. And I think that's very right on brand to what we were just talking about of seeing our own images, is that you knew what this looked like. And so if the idea is light versus dark, then I could totally see something along these lines where you keep that part in to have this. But, you know, I might even just crop out all of the beach if that's what your subject is. Then I think the beach is doing nothing for that. And I think cropping out the beach to have this dark versus light in the image is very important. And you're going to really want to accentuate that as well. Also, you have a dust spot here, unless that was on your lens, but you probably already know that. And I think something along these lines in terms of my edit would probably be how I do it. Obviously, we got to remove some of that blue saturation. Yeah, I would edit it like this if that was your subject. And I also, you know, weirdly enough, once cropping it, once listening to what you thought the subject was, and once approaching it from that as a subject, I like the way this looks a lot comparatively to where we started, which was this. And I think that's a huge difference very quickly, just based off of trying to figure out what you want someone to see. I hope that answers, and also I hope I wasn't too harsh. I actually think, interestingly enough, I actually think that it was a communication breakdown of not having any idea what you wanted someone to see when you took this image. But after saying it, makes a lot of sense. Fun fact, I've never cleaned my sensor before. But I'm like 95% sure there's no dust on my sensor, and I've never cleaned it before. Weirdly enough. So, all right. That's where I'm going to end the stream. Tim, thanks for being here. Everyone else, thanks for being here. Bree, good seeing you. I don't know who's still around, but if you're here, thank you. I'll see you on the next one. Video on Sunday. I believe a video on next Sunday, but I don't believe I'm going to release a video on, I think it's Christmas this Sunday, so yeah. So there will be a week that gets skipped. Also, there's a video with Gavin coming out. That's either this Sunday or next Sunday. I haven't decided, so hope to see you guys soon. Thanks for being here. Thanks for sending me images. You know, this is great. Maybe next time we'll get Bree in here. We'll just do a cross talk stream. That would be fun. Cool. See you guys in the next one. Later.